All right. Hi, Dr. Byra. Thanks for joining us today at Night Shift Autism.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we provide support for families day and night. So I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. We're going to talk a little bit about UpskillABA, right? Your company, and understanding data in your child's treatment plan, assessing progress, and collaborating with your child's BCBA on treatment planning. So we're really happy to have you. And why don't you just start and tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and Upskill.
Great. So I am a BCBA-D, so I'm a behavior analyst at the doctoral level. I have been certified for over 17 years and in the field for over 20. I've done the traditional in-home, in-school, and center-based care. And about 8 years ago, I transitioned to start building clinical decision support systems to aid both providers and funders, so insurance companies, on how to evaluate whether or not they're getting good response to treatment. And I also do a fair amount of consulting for ABA provider companies.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit, do you have your favorite, like a favorite niche out of all of those things?
I do have a preference for decision models because I am able to help more folks on a wider scale. There's only one me in terms of consulting, so there's only so many hours in a day that I can help other folks do that on a one-on-one kind of basis versus decision models. Everyone who logs in can kind of get access to my brain.
I love that. I love that. That's fantastic. Well, I'm very interested to hear your perspective on what you think parents need to be focusing on. What have you seen as the trend in the field of behavior analysis or ABA across like parent and caregiver training specifically?
Sure. So I will have to, rewind a little bit because I was brought up before insurance mandates happened. And so I'm dating myself. I'm that many years old. I'm a dinosaur. So everyone, when I was starting in services, was getting either private funded services, or they were coming to the school and they were on an IEP. And so we had the opportunity to attend those IEP meetings and updates and things like that with parents. But it was different than us being able to go into their home and provide that consultation. So I was really excited in the one sense to get that insurance coverage because it just expanded services to so many families. It did allow us to go into their home and help them where they really needed it. But I do think there is a kind of lack in our training programs to really prepare folks to do that well. And I do know from working with funders, because I do build models for funders, that code, that caregiver guidance code is the one that is most underutilized, that providers avoid it. If we're supposed to do once a week, we're maybe getting it done once a month. I have unfortunately seen plans where they've done one touch point over a 6-month authorization. And that to me is really unacceptable.
Yeah, I can't agree more. So, and I've seen that as well on the provider side and working on insurance side too, that there is that lack of knowledge on how to engage parents. And I like to kind of think of it in terms of, they're people, right? It's not a mystery. Most people are not a huge mystery. And in that way, like if we come at it from that perspective, like really looking at, well, who is this person and what do they need? What does their child need? How can I help? Versus like, oh gosh, I have to sit in this meeting and talk about this feeding program for 30 minutes so I can get my billable time in. Those are two very different perspectives. And I think sometimes just kind of breaking down that barrier helps with providers who are maybe feeling insecure about it.
Right.
So on the parent end, like, what do you think parents should expect? What should parent and caregiver training look like in today's ABA?
I think it starts at the very beginning, the interview process of like, what's bringing you to service, right? It's not just a diagnosis. It is things are happening in your life that are challenging. And so it's great that we are doing assessment of your child, right? I'm going to see all the deficits. So I can start planning so we can start working on them. But how does that impact you at home in your day-to-day makeup from the time I get my kiddo up to the time I breakfast, bring him to the center or bring him to school or wherever we are, to that getting them to bed every night. And hey, actually, are we sleeping through the night? Are we asking asking those types of questions. It's not just, do they respond to their name and do they know their colors? I mean, all those things are important too, but if no one's sleeping, no one's having a good time. I can't come ready to learn. I can't go to my job ready to work if no one's gotten a good night's sleep. So I'd be looking at the very beginning initial assessment. What kinds of questions are they asking? And it's those big ones, the daily impactors. Sleep. Are we eating? Are we eating enough? Are we eating a variety of things? Are we eating stuff we shouldn't? Right? Like that, these are important things to know. Are we getting our needs met? Do we have ways to communicate those to people who are important to us? And if we're not asking those types of questions, that's my first problem, if we don't even know to ask that. But then if I go to the extent to ask for that, what am I doing about it in the treatment plan to address it? So if I have a kiddo on the spectrum, chances are they also have some other diagnoses, whether that be medical condition or another psychiatric condition, but maybe going to the dentist, to my doctor's appointment, that's really challenging. It's been an adverse experience for a whole family. So we are either doing dental appointments, under anesthesia. We avoid all of our doctor's appointments to the best of our ability, or like whenever we do have to go, it is just awful for all involved. Have I told my provider that? And if yes, what is my provider doing to help me get over that? Like, how can we get to the dentist without sedation? How can we go to the doctor's office without it just being challenging behaviors and duress? So if we need to ask the questions. Two, if we ask those questions and get those types of answers, what are we doing to get that going? And then are we reevaluating that every time we're meeting to touch? Hey, have we had an opportunity to, go to the doctors because it's cold and flu season? We're probably going. How did that go? What pieces got better, if any? And if they didn't get better, why not? And how can I fix it? We need to be doing constant evaluation, being willing to recycle. Not the first thing we try isn't always going to be the magic quick win. Or maybe it's getting better, but it's still not great. So I still need to make some adjustments there. The other piece I would look at those initial assessments, and should be a continuous process, is looking at not just how are things impacting my child, but how are they impacting our whole family unit? Are there siblings? How's that relationship? Can we have a sleepover at grandma's house? No, how come? Like, why can't we do that? So I'd be looking at some kind of quality of life survey that they're doing, whether it be the family quality of life, whether that be the parental stress index, something of that nature, to make sure, am I moving the needle, not just on a skills assessment for my young learner or my middle school age learner or my young adult learner? Yeah. What am I doing to make everything better for that whole family unit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that holistic perspective is really important, because if you can't go to the grocery store, if you can't have any respite on the weekends because of safety concerns for elopement, right? Or, like you said, staying overnight at grandparents' house for respite care, like those are such impactful quality of life things. Not everybody can afford a babysitter. Not everybody has commercial insurance, not everybody has that ability to have those extra things. And so really that independence of that child is critical for those home aspects of care. So you mentioned some quality of life measures. And so I think in the field we have seen across the board this increase with, CAS, ACQ, and BHCOE accreditations, like all coming out with some standardized care and looking at those outcome measures and trying to give a better picture of how our services are impacting families on that holistic side. And I was kind of curious what you thought about those, how they work in combination with determining progress, as well as goals for the member or the kiddo, that kind of thing.
Sure. I think there's a lot of subjectivity still with those guidelines. I think they're more like broad strokes measures. Yeah. I mean, a good starting point for sure. But I think if we look at our field as a science, we see that 3 data points is a trend, right? And so I wouldn't just look at goals mastered as like my overarching, like, yes, things are going well because my kiddo mastered this number of goals out of the total number of goals we targeted. So either that was a percentage or just a whole number. That's an important piece. Like, don't get me wrong. But if you come home, if you come to me, I'm a parent and we're having our caregiver training and we're doing like a quarterly update to say like, how are things going? And you tell me, your son mastered 20 goals. Okay. Great. I'm glad we're doing something, but like you're saying, I still can't go to Target because I know as soon as I get to the checkout and we see the balloons, there's going to be a massive tantrum. And so we still avoid it. Or like we are not toilet trained yet. And I told you from the very beginning, I really need my kiddo toilet trained because they're 4.5 now. I can't get after school. I can't get any kind of aftercare daycare because they won't take them unless they're potty trained after age 3. Like, where are we with that? And so I would be looking at what are we mastering in the clinic? And again, is that impacting anything at home? Because to be honest, if I can be completely blunt, which I tend to be, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference to me if my kiddo can do a billion things in your clinic and 0 has changed at home. And I wish providers would take a little bit more thought to that. I mean, yes, please get excited that, hey, we can do all this great stuff in the clinic. Because yes, we do need to be working on deficits. But if you can't see any of that translate or bubble over, have any kind of impact on day to day from sundown to sun up with mom and dad, I would still say you're not doing your job as a practitioner because you haven't moved the really important thing. Because when kids leave your care or when the RBT leaves the home, because you're doing home-based services, if everything goes back to the way it was, if everything goes back to baseline once the service provider leaves, mom and dad are no better off, right? So like, what are you doing to mitigate, to make sure that that doesn't happen, that all the progress you're seeing one-on-one with this kiddo, mom and dad are also reaping the benefits of those. And if it's not, like, hey man, we've got this really organized in the clinic, I can't get it at home. What are you as a BCBA doing to fix that? And then if it's not, parents, tell your BCBA, I am not seeing what you're seeing at the clinic. Like you're describing a very different kiddo that I'm seeing day in and day out right now. Because it's important. Like we need feedback. We need to know because again, if we are doing caregiver guidance and we're only doing it once every other week for an hour or something like that, maybe you're even coming into the clinic, maybe I'm not going to your home, I'm not going to be in a great position to judge, are things really different? Especially if there are issues at bedtime and things that I'm not there putting your kid to bed. I don't know if it's gotten any better. I'm not there when they're waking up in the middle of the night. Like you have to tell me. So I would tell parents, like, don't be afraid to tell your BCBA, hey, we're X number of weeks, months into this, and I'm not seeing what I thought I'd be seeing. Like, what can we do? What's the path forward from this? What can we do differently? Can we work this out together? Because, I'm not sleeping. Sleep is important for all of us. Or we can't go, I can't bring him to the park. I can't go to a birthday party. I can't do X. I can't do Y. I can't do Z still. And that's really important to me. I would say sometimes as providers, we are not great asking what is most important to you. What I would think would be a priority may be very different than what a parent thinks is a priority in the moment. I gave that explanation or example of toileting, being able to be independent in the bathroom out of diapers. I would say for a lot of families, once we hit the 4 to 5 year old mark and kids are showing readiness, that usually is something that they would like to work on. Because again, access to childcare, diapers get real expensive when we start leaving the standard sizes and things like that. But I've also worked with some parents that age 5, you know what, I got 12 other fish I would rather fry before we even begin, working on toilet training. I can change diapers for 6 more months. I'd rather get skill 1, skill 2, or problem behavior 1, 2, or 3 organized first, and then we can come back to that. So providers shouldn't be making assumptions. And so then parents also, please tell us what we don't know. We don't know how to prioritize your goals.
I have 2 thoughts on this. One is kind of talking about parental stress during this time, and weighing that against the available criteria and assessments that BCBAs have in their disposal and the bridge that should be there in being able to understand not only like the broad deficits, which are, typical VB-MAP or ABLES or APLES or whatever are going to paint for us, versus the caregiver or the parent's ability to really analyze in that moment, in that stressful time,
Right.
what my kid actually needs,
Right.
or what is a problem. And sometimes I wonder if this is an issue of, how can we train our clinicians to ask better questions in order to navigate understanding that parental stress, because most people, when they're super stressed, can't make really clear decisions, especially if it's been like that for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think as practitioners, we need to put on our layman term hats and not get so behavior analytic in our jargon when we are giving assessment scores and things like that back to parents. And parents, I encourage you to stop your BCBA and say, I'm not quite following here. I'll give you an example. My refrigerator this summer sounded like a leaf blower was going off in my kitchen. So we called up the appliance repairman and he came, and something happened when there was some ice buildup on the fan and it was making this terrible noise. But he doesn't say that. He didn't say, oh, there's some ice buildup. He starts talking about, well, when the humidity and the this and the compressor and I'm just like, what? Do I need a new fridge? What does this mean? I am speculating, I'm either going to be out a few $1,000s to replace this fridge. Do you need to order a part? What's the big picture here, bro? And so I stopped him and I said, hey man, I got to level with you. You need to explain this to me like I'm 5. What's actually happening here? Do I need a new fridge? Yeah. And he's like, oh, no, you don't. No, it's frozen. I'm going to take my heat gun. I'm going to defrost it. We're going to start up the fan and we should be good. He was wrong. A week later, we got a new fridge, but he at least explained to me what was wrong with it in a way that made sense to me. So I'd also please, tell parents, advocate for yourself to say, I'm not really sure what that means to me. Us as providers need to do a better job just being forthcoming with a way to talk to stakeholders about what's important, whether we are talking to a funder, whether we're talking to caregivers, whether we're talking to teachers, we need to be able to, we need to deliver that information in a way that's meaningful. But if we don't, because we forgot to put on our talking to caregiver hat, caregivers, please tell us, I'm not really sure what you mean by they gained X number of points on a VB-MAP. What is a VB-MAP? How many points are there? Is 1 good? Is 12 bad? What is happening here? We need to do a better job remembering who our audience is. But I'd also just really encourage the audience to tell us to start over, explain this to me like a non-behavior analyst. And if you have a good provider, they should take zero offense to that. They should be apologetic and restart as many times as needed to present it in a way that they understand.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because sometimes I think it's easy for parents to feel overwhelmed and feel intimidated by a professional telling them, hey, these are all the things that your child has wrong, or these are all the things that we need to work on. And it's 500 things. And the parent's holy God, this is never going to happen.
Right.
So really being able to break it down, chunk it out, make the connection, because I think the connection part is so important. To get that buy-in, because again, once you present that plan, then you have to implement that plan, right? So I think those are important points for sure. And kind of piggybacking off of that. So, what steps do you think parents should take in order to collaborate with their BCBA? What should their role be in that treatment planning process? We were talking a little bit about okay, well, it's a professional's job to say this is the assessment, this is what I did, and then what?
Great question. And I'm so glad that you asked, because you should be the loudest voice at that table. Like, yes, the BCBA went to graduate school and is a professional, but no one at that table knows your kiddo better than you do. So they've had a limited amount of time to do some testing, which your kiddo may or may not have been super cooperative with, right? May either with like held out on skills because I don't know you, I'm in a strange place. We may have had zero problem behavior because we were just like hanging out on mom's lap because we're too afraid to be where we're at. We may have way more challenging behavior than we normally had because, again, strange place, strange environment. So do not be afraid to say, this is what I typically see. This is what we've experienced at home over this amount of time to this, like this many times a day to this level of intensity. Like be the voice for your kiddo, because again, you know them best. I would be really clear about what you are capable of committing to. I do get really frustrated with BCBAs who say, oh, once they master matching at the clinic, we're going to do matching at home. No, we are not. Because let me tell you, I'm a parent. I have an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old. And you best believe when my kids are done with school and they're doing homework and stuff, like the last thing I want to try to do while I'm trying to make dinner and get all their things, done for the next day, bring to sports practice and stuff like that, is get out some data collection sheet and like sit down and be like, oh, wait, what are the instructions again? How do I run this? Where are the materials? Give me a break. So please be very, very vocal about your commitment and ability to do any of that, because it's just going to make that relationship more adversarial, right? Like they're going to come back next month and be like, hey, how's the data collection going? You're going to be like, oh, where was that paper that I never filled out, right? And that's like a whole month that you've, wasted on, potential professional guidance of like, actually, instead of matching, if we could have actually worked on my kiddo sitting at the table during dinner, like through a meal, that would have like really made my life way better. And I would have committed to that because it's really important to me. So talking and being very open and honest with your BCBA about like, I'm glad that my kid's going to learn this in your clinic, but I don't want to try and incorporate that, into my home life. But it would be great if I could get help with X or Y or Z. That would be really helpful, like at the get-go. But I would also say when you're working with the provider and you're determining if this provider is a good fit for you, like their ability to hear that and work with you on that is going to be either a green or a red flag, right? Like they're like, yes, cool, tell me more. Green flag, right? Like, of course, I'm not going to have you take discrete trial data at home. That's crazy. Yay, green flag. We like them. They're like, well, this is what we do here. Like, maybe you want to shop around for someone else. Yeah. And I realize that can be hard because maybe you've already been on a wait list and you're just trying to get, into services. But I think that relationship is going to be, just the most significant one you're going to have throughout your kiddo's life is who you're working with as a professional. And if right off the bat, they're not willing to make any kind of modification or, change and adjustment and tell me more about this and how can we come together and work on this as a team. If they're not on team your kiddo, then maybe you want to pick another team.
Yeah, I love that because as a parent, I feel that deeply. As a provider, one of my biggest pet peeves is seeing parent goals written as parent will collect data on XYZ behavior at home. And my first thought is, no, they're not. Like, that's not going to happen. Right. You can talk in generalities and say, you know what, like, do you feel like this has gotten better or worse at home? Right. That's what a parent is capable of telling you. Yep. Unless you get a parent who really wants to be engaged in that data collection process, which I've had parents want that as well. Yep. But for the most part, when there are lots of things to juggle in life, that is not going to happen unless, like you said, it's tied to a value, it's tied to something that's highly impactful for the parent.
Right. Yeah. Or just the frequency of that, right?
Yeah.
Like 1 day a week, right? I can commit to taking some actual duration data on a tantrum, right? Like, cool, I can do that once, right? And it's going to be plus or minus 30 seconds from when I actually got my phone on.
Exactly.
And like flexibility of like, can I just keep those recorded stopwatches on my phone, right? And that's my permanent product. And then when I have caregiver training, I tell the BCBA that and they write it down for me. I don't need to have a clipboard in my kitchen, you know, with the date and this and that. Like work with the parent. Like what can you do and how I can make it easier for you? Because that's what we need. Response effort has to be at the forefront of planning for every BCBA. Response effort and like how important this is to you. Because if something's really, really important, like you're saying, even if it's a little bit more response effort, I'll do it because I really want to get it done. I really want help with this. I want this behavior to get better versus you, BCBA, want me to do this. And it seems hard and terrible. Like my willingness for response effort is like this. I'm not going to do it.
Especially after 5 p.m.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when I'm making dinner and, you know, there's siblings in the home who also need my attention. There's just a lot of competing contingencies for parents to juggle it all. Did I mention no one slept last night also?
Yes.
Like as behavior analysts, we need to remember all the different setting events that can make all the things more challenging. So yes, no one's sleeping. I actually made 2 different meals tonight because I made what everyone else is going to eat and then what my child with special needs is going to eat because they hate anything that's green. And guess what? It also needs to be brown and crunchy and this and that. And so I've made 2 meals. No one slept, like all the things, right? We as providers need to be tuned into that a little bit more.
I think some of that too, like is empathy, right? Like you do need to understand that human everyday occurrence, right? Because nobody is outside of those contingencies. If you don't sleep for days, if you stay out too late, right? Or you have a million things to do in the day. It doesn't matter if you have kids or not. Like there are always things I think that can be drawn in relation to the family that you're working with, which will help that rapport building, that will help that. And if we remember that at the end of the day that we're all people, we're all human, subject to these things, that it will help our ability to create a more meaningful treatment plan, not just one like copy pasting goals, that kind of thing.
Right. Yep. And last time I checked, your kiddo with autism didn't wake up on Saturday and be like, oh, is it the weekend? Cool. I'm not going to engage in any challenging behavior today. I'm going to do everything that's presented to me. I'm going to sleep in my own bed and go to bed at 7:30 because I know everyone's tired. Nope. All day, every day, right?
Every day.
We don't get this weekend off or a holiday off or, all the things. It's all the time. So maybe you provider had the whole weekend to recharge and do all your preferred activities and
your self-care.
Right?
Self-care.
Exactly.
Yes. Yep. So important. But yes, lacking on the parent end for sure. This has been lovely. I really appreciate your feedback on all of this for our parents and our subscribers. And is there anything that you want to share at the end, like anything in particular, any last advice before we kind of wrap up for today?
Yeah, I will say that if your provider is not using a quality of life index, they can get it for free. If they go to my website, they can download the family quality of life. You can download it yourself and fill it out and email those results to your provider if they're not already collecting them. If you just want to peruse it as a parent and ask like what kind of questions they might be looking at, you can take a look at it there.
That's fantastic. I would love to add that to our notes for our families and whatnot to be able to take a peek at. Because even that self-assessment, right? Sometimes you don't realize how something is impacting you until you take a minute to answer some questions that are pointed. And to understand like, oh, this has really become an issue, because sometimes when you are sleep deprived, you just don't realize how hard it becomes.
Absolutely. And then coming soon, I am working on a tool for parents to better aid them attending medical appointments, especially being a specialist. And so having everything all organized ahead of time so that you're not frantically in the appointment. Oh, shoot, I forgot when we started this medication and how long we take it for and if we actually take it every day or not. So I am going to be releasing that pretty soon. So check back.
Ooh, yeah, for sure. Well, absolutely. We'd love to have that resource from you. We really appreciate your time, Kristen, and we want to thank you for all the work that you've done.
Thanks for having me.
See you later.